What's good, everybody? Nigel Marcellus here, and welcome to a very special episode of the CONVO. This is a special edition because I'm calling it Black Men's Roundtable. I got a lot of my brothers with me, and we're really just going to have a conversation talking about how we navigate being black men. What does vulnerability look like? What does intimacy look like? Healing, relationships, love, and everything in between. So I'm really excited to have this. I'm not going to say any more except do my quick bio, let them introduce themselves, and then we get right into it. So for those who don't know, I'm Nigel Marcellus. I'm 28 years old. I'm from Malden, Massachusetts. I'm single. I've been single my whole life. It's been hard out here, but it be like that. Appreciate you, King. Appreciate you, King. You got it.
My name is Joel Paul Jr., most know me by Junior. I'm a senior here at the University of Kentucky, majoring in kinesiology. I do want to, go ahead and thank you for even having us out here because I feel like spaces like this is really needed. I know we talk about that all the time. I think vulnerability is really big. Yeah, man, I'm single, you know what I'm saying? But I think a relationship status is like just invested within myself. And I think I just make a point with that because, that's big for me. So that's me.
Okay.
How's it going, everyone? My name is David Robinson IV. I am a 32-year-old man, heterosexual, cisgendered, he, him pronouns. I'm from Virginia, and, I'm single as well, working through it. It's a process, but I'm doing that self-journey right now.
All right, so I'm going to switch it up a little bit. So my name is Jamal McDaniel from Louisville, Kentucky. I am a husband, I'm a father, I'm also a brother, and I'm also a friend. And I want to say all those things because I think that black men, we exist in all of those spaces, right, when we think about relationships. So I'm excited to talk a little bit more about that today.
Cool. So what's going on, y'all? My name is Destin Mazel. I am a third-year PhD student at the University of Kentucky, studying counseling psychology. I'm a Georgia boy through and through. I'm originally from Atlanta, Georgia, but I'm rocking out here in Lexington. Relationship status, single, outside, having a good time. I'm just joking. But I'm single but dating, so that's where I'm at with it.
Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Walter Malone from Detroit, Michigan. What up, dope? Been married for the last 12 years, going on 13 in September. I have 2 children, beautiful children. And I'm really excited about the day just to kind of fellowship with a group of men and have conversations around our socialization and how we typically navigate society.
Man, again, appreciate all y'all. And again, we're just going to jump right into it. I think before we talk about love, before we talk about mental health, healing, and all these different aspects, I really want to ground this conversation in this idea of vulnerability. I think a lot of times when we talk about black men, we aren't raised to be vulnerable, right? And we're not really taught what it means to be vulnerable until we get to a place, especially when we're dealing with a woman, when she's asking us to be a lot more vulnerable. And I think by then, a lot of us, we don't know what that means. So I really just want to ground the conversation first. And how do you guys define what vulnerability is? Or what does vulnerability specifically mean to you? And anybody who wants to hop in,
You about to go?
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, just to kind of get the ball rolling. I think one of the biggest things with vulnerability, I think, is an understanding of how you feel. I don't think you can necessarily, provide, give yourself the space to be vulnerable if you don't really, process what it is that you're feeling. And when I say understanding, I don't mean you got to know it to a T. I know this is what I'm feeling, why I'm feeling it. You may not have all those answers right off the bat, but I think understanding, being okay with the fact that you're feeling these feelings and understanding that it's okay to have feelings, that's what makes us human. I think that's kind of, the level of vulnerability. That's kind of how you get into that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm thinking it's vulnerability to me is like a willingness to release, right? Because I think it's not even just about, how you release things. You have to be willing to, right? And being in the position, feeling comfortable, feeling like you can be honest, to put it all out there.
When I think about vulnerability, I think about the connection that we have to self and being our authentic self. I think there's a lot of emotional experiences that we typically have. And as men, I think because of how we are socialized, we only allow ourselves to experience certain emotions. When we think about anger, I have the freedom to really express anger. But what about sadness? What about pain? What about hurt? And so I think about vulnerability in kind of that way of how am I being my authentic self from an emotional standpoint, and how did I share that particular type of connection with the individuals around me?
Yeah, when I think of vulnerability, it's like acknowledging your full self.
Yeah.
And that always doesn't come with a preference of who you think you ought to be or who you want to be.
Yeah.
Being in the space right now, it's both a lot of love and anxiety for me. And it'll probably diffuse in a moment, but there's this vulnerability I have, like, oh, okay, I'm used to sharing myself with others. But the moment lights turn on and eyes are looking, it's like, okay, showing up vulnerably is acknowledging how I feel and acknowledging what's happening in the room. And so just a little bit of self-awareness as well, I would say.
For sure. I think of vulnerability like in terms of relationships with other folks. So I think in terms of songs and lyrics, so I probably quote a lot of them here. But there's a song that says, I knew myself before I knew anyone. So I never had a problem being vulnerable with myself. Like I feel like I've always had some type of emotional awareness when it came down to self. The issue came with sharing that with somebody else. Another song lyric, Drake, a song called In Too Deep, he said, same reason I tried to show you who I was outside of the club, outside of the things that a man like me does. So I have a difficulty with doing that, right? So being able to show up, be the person I am inside my house when nobody's around, be that person. Or, sharing your emotional things you journal, write down, share that with somebody. That's the difficulty that comes with vulnerability to me. So,
Man, it kind of goes to David's point, especially I definitely understand the anxiousness, the vulnerability it takes for us to even record. And I think it's because, one, you don't know where it's going to go, right, once you put it out there. And even for folks that you might have a close relationship, right, you still have to have a level of trust, right, that when you're being vulnerable and intimate with this information that you're sharing, that like it's, you know where it's going to go and that it's going to stay in a safe space. So I feel that.
When it comes to that, though, do you feel like we have, like, vulnerability, is it first trusting ourselves to be able to communicate that, or is it trusting somebody else before ourselves? Because I think sometimes, when it comes to things that we feel, a lot of how we express ourselves comes from how we feel about ourselves from inside, right? So do you think like that trust has to be created within ourselves and we have to trust ourselves in order to be vulnerable? Because I think there's a lot of people who, I would argue, they feel like they know themselves. But going back to what you said, there's always that barrier when it comes to somebody else.
That's the growth in self-awareness. Like as you begin to acknowledge, this is how I think, and I'm different in this way, and this is my personality. But then navigating with other persons and personalities in the room, when I think of this idea of like, black men in a room, it's like this idea of being cool. So how can I maintain cool long enough to maybe be vulnerable in these acceptable kind of ways? So we have artists, Drake was being brought up, I think before that was a little bit of Kid Cudi, right? Like, okay, black men, we can be sad now. It's okay to be sad. We can acknowledge this, like, we don't always have to be hard and tough. We can be a little sad, and we can be maybe a little more intimate with our women. And now we're at a phase where it's just like, acknowledgement. I think the acknowledgement of where we are is really important, and entering any sphere of that personal identity and that identity amongst other people.
Yeah, I agree. I think about that conformity, right? Like who's around you, and I think sometimes it's you have to take into consideration the context of who's around you, what's happening. Sometimes we conform to norms because we want to feel connected, and sometimes when we're conforming to those norms, we're not really being our authentic self, but we're wanting to be, connected to others. And I think what gets lost in that is like, well, what are your true opinions? What are your true thoughts? What are your true emotions in relationship to the context in which you might be discussing, or the context of the environment? So I think that acknowledgement and that awareness, and also that feeling of wanting to be connected to others, and just making sure that in doing that we're our authentic self. I think vulnerability plays a role in that.
I think I want to go a little bit deeper with what you said too. I think it also comes to like acceptance,
Yeah.
right? Like we all want to be accepted by somebody else, right? And even when you think about vulnerability, if you're talking about how it starts with the self first, like you have to be able to accept and reconcile with whatever thoughts, emotions, and feelings you might have first, right?
Yeah.
And then there's this hope that if this goes out, right, that you can accept that this person knows that you're feeling this way and experience all those things. And so I think it all comes back to want to not only be accepted for who you are, but also the challenges and things you might be going through.
That's a good point. So let's frame this, right? Because we have a range of different relationship statuses here. We got some people married, we got some people single, we got some people outside. You know what I mean? We got some people who might be a little bit heartbroken, and people who are like, we just don't date at all, right? Before we get to the certified lovers who already have something, for my single people in the room, how are you navigating vulnerability and being single, and how does that like really reflect when you are talking to a woman, or in your experiences when you do talk to women?
For me, it's tough. So Nigel, I align with you when you were saying like you've been single your whole life, because that's how it feels like for me. So I'm not really used to like putting emotions into words with another person that isn't like a family member. Like these are intimacy words, right? These are like, hey, I'm trying to get close to you words, but I don't really know how to put these words in order to not make you feel this way or that way. And so it's at a mix right now. I think where I feel like in my singleness and vulnerability is like, how much space can I create where it's like, I want you to grow and be great, and I want you to do the best, have the best life that you can have, but I want to see if that life fits, or if our lives fit together. And so what type of pulls, magnetic connections, like, oh, okay, this does work, and in a way that this alignment, like, okay, we're going together, this is going somewhere, but the polarity of male female in a heterosexual situation being men suppose the role of the pursuer. And as the pursuer, I might need to be doing this act or this thing, but at the same time I feel nervous doing those things, because I'm like, I also want to get to know you outside of this arena. And so I'm struggling with understanding how to get to know someone by not necessarily pursuing them at the same time. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, I definitely get that. I would say, like, for me, it's a part of my struggle, and a part of thing that it took me a long time to not only admit, but to really recognize how like the behaviors show up, is that for the longest time I just didn't feel worthy or like I was good enough to be in a relationship, right? I think from my experience, I have my parents' marriage, which is very healthy and very loving, and they've been together for Lord knows how long. But I've also seen a lot of broken marriages or like toxic relationships. And I think because I've always had this like black or white thinking when it comes to relationships, I've always felt overwhelmed. It was like, it's either really great or it's really terrible, and there's no middle ground. And I think because of me not feeling like I'm good enough, or me not feeling like I could be the best or the greatest partner in the world, you know what I mean? I set this standard for myself that for the longest I've been like running away from anything that comes close, because that like worthiness just wasn't there for myself in these relationships. So I think like what I'm learning, because I've been single, I'm used to being by myself, and I'm used to having all this time to myself and not having to build with anybody else, and doing what I want and going out when I want and coming back home. You know what I mean? So that is learning, to your point of like, now when you put somebody to this picture, or when you're interested, how does that even look now that I've been in this space for so long?
That's big. I was over y'all going, and I'm just like, my mind's just kind of like turning. I think for me, when it comes to being single, and we talking about vulnerability, I think to your point, we talking about being outside. I know when you hear that, you laugh, you kind of got a little connotation with that, but I think for me, being outside, the way I look at it is understanding that even when you're not in the season of a relationship, love is still all around. And I think a lot of time we wait for us to be in like connection, or not even connection, in a relationship status with somebody to be like, okay, this is love, this is, nah, part of being single and being vulnerable is understanding that you can look around and still experience love in other facets and forms. And I think being vulnerable is allowing yourself to have that type of love and receive that love. You know, I think a lot of times when you're single, whether you came from like a bad relationship or whatever you come from, it's like, nah, I'm closing myself off. You know what I'm saying? Because that's where my mind was at. I'm like, man, I don't worry about that. Like, I'm, you know what I'm saying, finna just be on my time only. But like being vulnerable enough to let people come through your life, and you don't have to, like you were talking about the pursuing, and you don't have to pursue, like, you know what I'm saying, you don't have to make it I'm gonna pursue you, we're gonna get in a relationship. Experience people and things for what they are. You understand? I think that's genuine love right there. What's supposed to happen is gonna happen. So I think being outside, I think for you too, being outside doesn't mean necessarily going and sleeping with women and doing a whole bunch of, it's finding myself, being authentic within myself, but also being vulnerable enough to accept love, even if it doesn't come in the terms that I may have wanted it to, or may have thought that I needed. I think that's what I look at it as.
I think that's great because I'm reflecting on the love of friendship that is a missing piece for us as men to feel like we can really enjoy ourselves in this time together without me feeling like I need to, get you in the bedroom type thing. You know what I mean? Like there is love in friendship, and I think that's not something I grew up with, or messages that I had where it's just messages I received was really like, find a woman, get married, and then establish a family, as opposed to like, find things that you love to do and find people that you love to do it with, and that'll help you explore more benefits of life. And it's just, I think that's a part of our narrative where like, we're constantly looking for somebody, constantly looking, all right, is this it? Is this it? And it's just like, it's a little taxing, you know?
For sure. I love my friends. I'll say that right now. Like, I'm a big fan of my friends. I think in my singleness, my friends hold it down, man. We have a great time together. So that is right. Like, receiving love from different spaces. In terms of like dating, I guess it's interesting at this point because we talk about vulnerability. And I think that I don't necessarily have a big fear of being vulnerable, but like, I've gotten to a space now at 25 where like, I test you to see if you're worthy of me to open up in this way. Right? Like you said, like, experience people for what they are. Like, if this is not what that is, and I don't feel safe, I don't feel like you're able to handle that side of me, then I don't feel like you deserve to know that part of me. That's okay. I think that's a part of protecting myself. So I think, dating right now is interesting because, everybody like wants men to be vulnerable and wants us to open up in this way, but like, how do you know that you're that person for me to open up with? You know what I'm saying? How do you not feel comfortable with you in that way? I'm always open and, communicating those things, but it's not an automatic, you deserve this because we've been texting for a month or 2 weeks. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's a build up to that. It's not just, let me open the floodgates of this Pandora's box of vulnerability for you. Like, I'm not in that space right now. I'm curious about what y'all's thoughts is on that, especially single folks.
Ooh, could I ask you something about that?
Yeah.
So how do you navigate, and this, could be your own opinion, how do you navigate in situations where let's say you picking that, you're like, okay, should I choose to be vulnerable? You get it wrong. Because I think a lot of times people, when we talk about it, they're like, okay, you got to figure out whether or not you worth being vulnerable. Once you do that and you get hurt, where do you go from there? Because some people, they close off. They, everybody going. But how do you navigate that for yourself?
I ain't gonna lie. At this point, a lot of little situationships I've been in and out of is like, dang, another one bites the dust. It's kind of like I expected that from you. You know what I'm saying? I expected me to give this part of myself to you, and you deal with it in that way. So I'm not saying it's a numbness. It's definitely an awareness of what I'm feeling, but it's like, I expected this to happen.
So do you like see the worst before like it happened? Because that's what it kind of sounds like. You almost like project the worst scenario happening before you even give it like a real chance.
I think I prepare myself for what I've seen in the past.
Gotcha.
So in terms of like history repeats itself, I'm a big believer in that. I'm a psychologist, so I recognize patterns. So I see, okay, I see where you're going with this right here.
Yeah.
I can already tell how you mad at text you all day, but it's like, got classes, I'm seeing clients all day. All right, I can see that creeping up in. So it's like, I recognize the patterns. I'm like, okay, I can see how this may go. And I communicate what it is and what it ain't, but sometimes this don't go the way I want it to go. But I guess that's a interesting space to be in, though.
Yeah.
But I'm definitely like, I can see it happening. So I ain't too hurt behind it, I guess, in most cases. Sometimes maybe, but not all the times.
To my married folks, how y'all doing it? How y'all doing it? Cause you hearing what we talking about, and I'm wondering like, is some of this like the place that y'all was in, before when y'all was trying to like navigate and when you first finding your partner, or like how is that navigated from y'all's perspective of like dating and then getting to marriage? And
I'm trying to figure out. I got a lot of different thoughts.
y'all hearing the struggle we got, you know what I mean? You hearing it's dating's ghetto out here these days.
So for me, I would say like prior to meeting my wife, I always thought I was gonna be like, I was the type of guy where I was like, you know, I'm always dating with intention, right? And I have this checklist of all the things that I want to see from the person before I engage. But what I didn't realize until I found my wife was that even though I had all these things that I wanted to see, I didn't realize all the things that I needed to work on. Because I had never really been in a relationship before like that. High school, you know, some people had real relationships in high school. I did not. You know, I didn't have a lot of experience really understanding not only like how to communicate with women, but also like what it's like to be in a relationship until I got with my now wife. And so I feel like definitely through the process of dating, I had to understand one, how to actually communicate, which required me to be vulnerable, right? Because for me, when it comes to conflict or anything that's uncomfortable, my default is to just shut down, right? And it's based out of fear. It's based out of not wanting to say the wrong thing, not wanting to make it worse. But what I had to realize is that you make it worse when you don't say anything, but two, you know, conflicts, especially when it comes to relationships, whether it's just dating or marriage, right, is to help you really understand how the other person feels, right? And figuring out how do you navigate a space where you both need to be heard, but also need to understand and find some type of compromise. And that was something that honestly, it's still a journey, right? I don't want to act like these things stop once you find that one. You have to continue to work on it. And so I think that I have grown in being more vulnerable with my wife, you know, and being honest too, right? Because I think a lot of times, even when you love somebody, you don't realize how much you also try to hold on to because you want to protect this other person's feelings, and realizing that like it's actually harming her more when you don't get things off your chest.
What was the question, man? Dating?
Like just how you navigate it, brother? How you get to marriage?
What's that mean?
How you get married, brother?
Dating is not marriage. Dating is dating. Marriage is marriage. There's no preparation for what that process will be, and you have to be open to the learning of what that process is, because in that process, both parties are coming together. I always give this suitcase analogy in talking about like how people come together. And so imagine having you coming into a relationship with a suitcase and your partner coming together in a relationship with a suitcase, and you have to fill one suitcase. You taking stuff out of your suitcase, and you removing stuff from your suitcase that you really want and desire, but you only got this one suitcase. And that's how I see marriage. And dating, you kind of can pick and choose, like, well, I'm keeping this because I'm not fully committed. In marriage, you let go all kind of stuff. Like, man, so I want these pair of underwear, but guess I ain't wearing underwear because these socks is important. I'm gonna put those in. Like, in its real talk, it's a constant decision to be married, right? And I know I've shared this before with many of you all. When I think about what love is a constant decision. It doesn't have an emotional thing attached to it, although you can feel emotion. That's not the love. The love piece is I'm deciding to be married to you consistently, and because of that reason, I'm going to communicate what I feel. We're going to talk through some things. We're going to create space for each other because we have a common goal, and that common goal is always we want to be married. Right? And so I think the journey, man, and Ma was hitting it. It's a constant education. It's a constant learning process, and being open up to that learning and letting go. Sometimes we come into relationship with ego. That ego is not even. You no longer. Ego don't even exist. It's just like, okay, how do we better fit together?
Yeah.
And if this is how we're gonna fit together, then what do we have to agree on so that we can move in that direction? Because if we don't agree, we're no longer moving in the same direction.
And it only gets more complicated.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Because Walter, he's been in the parenting game a lot longer than me. But even having a child that's almost 2 years old, you still realize then you got to work together even more, right? You got to figure out how to get on the same playing field. You have to make sure that you're not projecting your own thoughts and own habits onto your child. And one thing that I'm already seeing, even with him being so young, he pays attention, right? And so when I think about even vulnerability, and I know we were talking about dating, but sometimes for me, I reflect so two things happen. I felt like growing up, I was always the one who was very in tune with his emotions. And so in some ways, I felt like I was very vulnerable, but it was never accepted, right? It was never socially accepted by a lot of folks, whether that's family, whether that's friends at school and things like that. And so if anything, I feel like I had to learn how to bottle things up. And because it wasn't role modeled to me what it's like to have healthy conversations and healthy expressions of emotions. And then I think for even, talking about marriage, my parents have a great marriage, my brother and his wife. I saw a lot of healthy relationships growing up, but what I didn't see, right, is that conflict management and the communication.
Yeah, that's real.
And if we're only looking at to Walter's point about love, love and vulnerability is just me to say I love you. I think there's more to it, right? And I think there were a lot of things that I didn't realize until I got married. I'm like, wow, it would have been helpful to actually hear about this or to see this, so that I can better navigate these relationships I'm in.
I got a question for you. Want to go
No, I was just gonna go over real quick. So you're saying that level of vulnerability comes with sacrifice, is what I'm hearing.
Oh man, it is the equation. You have to. I mean, if you have the expectation that you're going to come into a relationship without sacrifice, that's going to be tough.
And that's just relationship in general. We're not just talking about marriage. We're talking about
relationship
in general. Gotcha.
Does that even apply to yourself?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Question for the married folks.
Shout out to the married folks.
All right. Shout out to the married folks.
Shout out to the black love.
So I'm hearing what y'all are saying, and I admit that old heads put me on game. They've always said some of the same things, and what I'm hearing, when I'm processing.
I was waiting. I ain't gonna lie. I was waiting for it. I knew it was gonna come.
You're old head. 21 old head. You big holding me once you're 21. But on the serious tip though, I hear that y'all are saying y'all accepted the discourse of a relationship with the person, and I think with dating, I don't know. It's I don't have to accept that. I don't commit to that discourse, right? So I'm curious about when you made that decision to get married, was it I'm ready to accept the discourse, or was it I found the one?
What
I mean? What's the
Good
difference?
question.
So
I like it.
You're not just coming into you remember it's a struggle, right? It's intentional. That the process of joining is an intentional struggle, right? And so you're not just accepting, you're struggling through it. And then when you realize why am I struggling so hard to open it when I just need to just open the door? Why I gotta struggle with it? Just turn the knob, man, open the door and deal with what you need to deal with, and stop rejecting feelings and emotions because you want to be right or you want to assume a particular position. No, I want to just be married. I want to be married. That's the goal. The goal just changed. I want to be married, and so what do we need to do to figure this thing out? Oh, you really don't like it when I do this? All right, cool. I'm good with that. I really don't like when you do that. Can you just stop? Cool.
Yeah, because all that stuff doesn't go out the window just because you decided you found the one, right? Because at the end of the day, you probably gonna see a lot more once you get married than you saw before, right? Because you are growing in comfort and vulnerability, right? Which means that a lot of times you realize oh shoot, we got some stuff to work through. And that's why for me, for us, premarital counseling ended up being amazing for us, because I think what it showed us was we're both human, right? We both make mistakes, and we both have to better understand what each other needs, in order to continue to make this a successful marriage, right? Because we were both committed to wanting to. I mean, when you say like accept the discourse, I didn't think of it like that, you know. And obviously, it might have just been because you just didn't see it, right? A lot of times when you are moving forward and you said you're ready to propose and get married, like you're on this high, right? You're on this excitement about moving forward. Most people, with your life, you're thinking about the wedding, you know, you're thinking about the house, you're thinking about all the glitz and glamour, right? But it's until you start to realize, like, in addition to that, right? Because that stuff is not actually the marriage. The marriage is the work. The marriage is the conversations. The marriage is the day-to-day things that nobody gets to see. And yes, you do have
Social
to,
media.
yeah. And yes, you do have to accept that, right? And that's why, you know, I would say reason why we thought and knew we were ready is because we were already navigating through those things, right? We had already gotten to a place where we felt like we knew each other well enough to understand, you know, pet peeves and understand like what each other needed to feel loved, right? Despite all the other things that might come, but to genuinely feel love from this person understands me, right? And I'm committed enough to work through and continue to experience this love with you, and that's why I made the decision.
So with
Let me throw this in there real quick, man. One of the things that I had to realize that there was something, it's not coming to mind, but there was something my wife was doing, and I just was like, dang, I hate when she do that. Dang, I hate when she do that. Actually, I'm remembering now, but I'm not gonna put that on video.
for your own
Don't
safety,
get in trouble,
brother.
man.
For your own safety, brother.
Man, I wish my wife would do this. Man. But it wasn't something she enjoyed doing. And so I said, okay, that you just don't enjoy it. All right, cool. I just accepted it because that she didn't want to do that. And so I accepted it, you know? And so I think what I've learned is that there's things that I might desire of my wife, but if she don't desire it, then is that, you know, I have to accept some of these things because I desire to be with her. You know what I'm saying? And so it's a lot of learning. You grow to that point, but you have to be open to grow. Because if you fight against it, you're just gonna be fighting.
Yeah. I mean, I was gonna say just on the flip side of that too, like they have to accept that of you too,
Absolutely.
right?
Absolutely.
And I think it's knowing that like, as much as you might want your partner to be this perfect person, you have to realize you're not either.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So with that, right, and being open to growing, right, and being open in that process, and that process is vulnerability in itself, because in that self you have to look at yourself in a way that you're being honest, you're being true, you're looking at the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? And I think when we talk about mental health, when we talk about doing the work, a lot of times we have conversations as Black men as far as like doing it, but we don't necessarily talk about how to do it, right? And I want to like take this conversation to really like unpack, how do you do the work to be open? How do you do the work to look at yourself and look at those ugly parts, or really break down the way you might have used to think, right? To get to a point where you're able to have that conversation with the woman or really build. Because I think, again, like I think in my experience as a Black man, it's always do this, be strong, figure it out, man up, right? But then nobody's really breaking down these like tangible ways. So when I don't feel like I could figure it out, that's when that like, oh, I feel less of a man. Or am I a man? Am I not as manly as this other person based on how to do it? So like for y'all, just like, how do you get yourself to a place to even be open with yourself?
I think at least for me, I know I'm only 21, you know what I'm saying, but I think something that's gotten me thus far is understanding that I'm always changing. I think a lot of times, you know, we try to think of, you know, where we want to go and what we want to be and who we are, but you're always changing, you know what I'm saying? And that's perspectives and that's circumstances and that's, you know, just who you are as an individual. And I think being honest and accepting to that change is a big thing, you know what I'm saying? I think we try to fit, whether it's social norms, you know what I'm saying? And it's not easy, you know what I'm saying? Because you see people around you doing this or telling you, you know, this is what you need to do to be a man, or this is what you need to do to be cool or acceptable. So like having that constantly, you know, pushed out and constantly promoted, it's almost like, damn, like, you know, maybe I'm not fitting those, you know what I'm saying, those norms that everybody else is trying to get me into, you know what I'm saying? But I think just understanding that, okay, this day I might feel like this, you know, next day I might feel like that, but that's not wrong, and it's okay to like, kind of like go through those emotions and feel that out. So I think for me, it's just being open to like my feelings and my emotions, and just being open to that change for me.
Mm-hmm.
I just gotta say, I ain't got the answers, Nigel. I really don't. I mean, I've lived this life, and initially the question was gonna be posed to the married folks, because it's a question of how do you attain that love for yourself and navigating loving someone else. Because in my singleness, I'm still struggling with loving myself, while I'm pursuing another person. And that's the difficulty of like, okay, so are we going to meet in the same place, and am I still going to do the work? And so, you know, I kind of just open it up to the floor, but like, I'm kind of curious, like, how do y'all know if you're giving the proper love to yourself and you know, that space of vulnerability, like, oh, okay, like, hey, I am a little stressed out right now, and I haven't really done that much for myself, but I'm gonna just keep going.
I think something came to mind was how does this serve me? How does how I am, what I internalize, how is that serving me? And if I have in my mind that I'm trying to get somewhere, and if that thing that I'm doing, that behavior, is not aligned, then that is telling me that I need to do something different. And so how is this behavior or thing that I'm doing serving me, and does it serve me in a way that's going to get me to X? And if that's the case, then I need to change that. And life is exploration. And if we're not exploring, then what are we doing? And so we're always learning and growing, like I said before. But we have to, you know, for me, it was putting myself in a situation to be able to speak to and name the things that I'm doing, and aim those things in such a way where I can get to an ultimate goal.
I would say, like, my question with that then becomes, how do you know that's the right goal to strive for?
You don't. But if I'm trying to figure out if it's the right goal, how will I know that? It's just where I'm aiming, because on my path, that might change because I figured something else out, but I'm moving forward constantly. And that's the best we can do, because other than, you know, knowing the future, we won't know.
I told y'all I love song lyrics. J. Cole, Love Yours. He was like, the good news is you came a long way. The bad news is you went the wrong way. That's what made me think about that. And sometimes there is a need for like a course correction.
Absolutely.
I think for me, it was a big course correction in my life. Like, I've always kind of been in tune. It was a big course correction. It was the pandemic, moving to Lex by myself, and then thinking that I want to be a psychologist and talking about emotions every day and how people process in the mind, and then getting in therapy with folks and be like, hold on, wait, why am I feeling like this? About your story, about what you're going through. And I'm going home, you know, sad. I work with Dr. Malone too. Talking to Dr. Malone, you know what I'm saying? Processing through stuff, and then you start to realize, like, oh, okay, that's the work, right? So processing through what this is that's coming up for me. Because oftentimes that can be a fleeting thought or a fleeting feeling that you kind of push past because you got work to do. But really sitting down with self and being like, okay, feeling this, why is that? And maybe even taking it a step further, right? Tapping in the community. So brotherhood, the things that we're doing here right now.
Facts.
And sharing those things. Or I don't know if you have a lady friend, but your lady friend, your boo thing. You know what I'm saying? Whatever the case may be. And even taking it a step further, getting your own therapist. That was something that was big for me during the pandemic as well. So those are like tangible things that I did to kind of come into it myself. But man, it was a journey trying to be a therapist and not really be fully competent about like emotions. Like, I talk about emotional competence all the time. I'm able to feel emotions, but I got a way I feel about that emotions, right? So I'm heartbroken, and I feel a way because I'm heartbroken. So I'm sad, heartbroken, right? And I'm like offended too, because you broke my heart. How dare you? You know what I mean? So that's a level of emotional competence that we don't really tap into. Our meta emotions about how we feel about it.
One thing I want to, that was good. The one thing that I do want to like echo too, and I think like just the importance of community, and this is something I had to realize for myself, is that like everybody can't come with you, especially when you're going towards that goal. And I think like being able to surround yourself with the people who not only hold you accountable, but like truly, truly, truly want to see you become the best version of yourself that you want to become. Not that they want you to become, that you want to become. Because I think like a lot of times for me, you know, just the people in this room coming to y'all, having real conversations about how we feeling, what we're going through. Those are the conversations that help me feel seen, help me feel heard, help me feel connected. And I think sometimes as Black men, we feel like we got to do this by ourselves, and we got to figure out by ourselves, and we got to power through by ourselves. So we're struggling, and we're struggling in silence to an extent where it's hurting ourselves, when really like the people around us, they do love us and they do care about us. And I think for me, a big step was being able to open myself up to the help around me that's already there, instead of trying to like power through it to myself.
Yeah, I think a big thing for me is like practice what you preach. And I feel like that's been a hard lesson for me when I think about, you ask like how to, right? I think philosophically I can think of a lot of different ways, and I can tell you, right?
But you have.
My thoughts.
But you do. Often.
But when I have to actually deal with it myself, right? Everything that I've told you almost goes out the window, and it shouldn't. And so just being, I think, realizing that not only you have to do the work, but that you have to practice. And I think practicing in, like you said, these communities of trust, I think is what's going to help you normalize that behavior for any relationship, right? And so for me, I think that's what's helpful.
And then as we get kind of close to the end, the one thing that I really do want to kind of end on is what I hear from a lot of women is when we see our homeboys doing something, or when we see something, why aren't we holding them accountable? And I think that's a huge conversation that I've heard a lot of people discuss. And I just want to pose to y'all, what does accountability look like when it comes to other Black men? Whether it's your friends, strangers, however you want to answer it, but like, what does accountability actually look like as Black men?
I would say accountability, one, isn't always comfortable. I think being able to accept the uncomfortability that comes with that. Because I think a lot of times, calling out your friend, I think some people kind of find, like we talked about this need of wanting to belong. I think a lot of times we silence ourselves in certain things because we want to feel connected. We don't want to be that one outlier. If everybody's doing it, why you not doing it? You know what I'm saying? But I think understanding that it's going to be weird sometimes. It's going to be an uncomfortable conversation that needs to happen. But I think understanding that one conversation and taking that initiative is that going to be that one change that everybody needs to see and everybody needs to hear that, oh, snap, like, you know what I'm saying? If you taking, you might lose some friends. I ain't gonna lie, you not, you know what I'm saying, there's certain company that you don't need to keep. But as we talk about aligning yourself with a certain path and getting to where you need to go, some of these people shouldn't even be here. And these conversations are meant to weed out the people that you don't need. These conversations are meant to push you into these new seasons where leaves are falling off. You understand me? So point. I think that's the biggest thing. And I think also understanding accountability is also like leading by example. So practicing what you preach. So, you going around and you carrying yourself a certain way that, that comes off. People pick that up. Like, I'm not gonna lie, every last one of y'all on this table, like, I take things from our conversations, from things that I see y'all doing. I don't know if y'all seen this man traveling the world and stuff like that. This man,
come on, brother.
He global, you know what I'm saying? Like, yeah, like he's swimming in foreign lands and different, you know what I'm saying? But I say that, you know what I'm saying? But I say that to say, like, things like that, leading by example, you know what I'm saying? Showing people, like you said, when you said outside, my first thought was you living life, you know what I'm saying? Going out and seeing things and, understanding that this life is short and there's experiences that we need to feel and put ourselves in. So leading like that, I'm like, damn, I could do that. You know what I'm saying? Like, I could do that. And I know how you guys speak to other people, how you love people, how you love me. I look at that and I put that, I write that down. I'm like, oh, I like that. Like, I'm listening to everything y'all saying. I'm like, oh yeah, this going in the bag. You know what I'm saying? This in the Duffy. So I think just that accountability just comes in carrying yourself in a way in which you want to see the world change. Because you may not be able to change every last person in the world, but if you can impact one, word of Tupac, if you can change that one person's life, you know what I'm saying, that one person, you did it. I think you did it.
And in terms of accountability, I think, first off, I love Black women. Black women are my safe space. I'm gonna marry Black women if I get
Amen.
married.
We love them.
Amen.
We love them.
Black love, Black women. We love them.
Come on.
I think sometimes what Black women don't see, they don't believe. So like in my friend group, in my circle, we hold each other accountable. Now I'm not about to go blast my friend on Twitter, on TikTok. I'm not about to correct him in front of you, right? But like those conversations in my friend group, I can speak to itself, happens and very transparently too, and a lot, right? I think it gets to a point where sometimes with friend groups though, like you don't want to be the person that's always saying something. So one thing that happened during the pandemic for me was I was isolated. So I saw a lot, I was reading a lot, I was understanding stuff a lot more. And I realized like I was checking, I almost cursed. I was checking it too, right? And I was calling stuff out when I seen it. But then I got on the out group and like, oh, you ain't tell me this now, right? Or I ain't know that, or I ain't get invited to that. And I think it was like a weird switch for me where I realized there's a level to how much you can hold somebody accountable instead of just meeting them where they are.
Yeah.
They just might not be there at that point. And that's difficult to balance. So right now I'm at a place with my friendship. I'm like, all right, what destiny you want right now? You want the one that's gonna laugh and kick it, you can tell me anything, we can just kick it, or you want somebody that's gonna give you some real accountability, some real advice right now. And that's just where I'm at with it. So yeah, I don't know. It's difficult to balance. I will say holding your friends accountable because they're just not there. And does that mean you cut them off because they're not there, or do you grow and learn with your friendships?
For me, to that point, if you are a genuine friend and a real friend, then I feel like it's a no-brainer to hold you accountable, right? Because some people aren't ready for that level of friendship, right? Where you can really hold them accountable to whatever things that either they say, right, or inappropriate behavior that they discuss. And so I don't think I have any issues with people that I really do feel like are genuine friends to hold them accountable. But I do think that there's still a level of vulnerability that it takes to do that well, right? Because it is still hard to tell people what they don't want to hear, right? Especially when you can't control what the response will be. And so I feel like that doesn't mean it's not necessary, but you still have to process that through the back of your mind and think about, and what's the risk, right? Do you lose this relationship, right? Does this help this person move forward? You just don't know. And you have to have some level of comfort in not knowing where it will go after that.
I think there's some things that are circumstantial, right? In certain circumstances, in thinking about who needs to give this feedback. Right? Do I need to give this feedback? Because I have to also understand, like, if I'm giving the feedback, will it be heard, or does somebody else need to give this feedback, right, for it to be heard? So some things I think are circumstantial. What I had to grow into is, because I love my friends, we're not just going to celebrate when things are on the up, right? When things are not going well and you're not doing things that value yourself, your family, and your friends, then that's where I need to give you some feedback. We out, you say something disrespectful, bro, what you doing? Right? What was that about? No, man, we don't do that. We don't get down like that. Because we in relationship. So if you are a reflection, if we're a reflection of each other because we tight like that, right? Then you also represent me. So you're not thinking about me when you do that. Now you've included me in this because you're talking to me about this thing that you did, and you think I'm going to agree with that. But, and so now it becomes a different type of conversation. So I think it's necessary for us to hold our friends accountable, because that's part of our love growth as well, right? Because I love you, I'm going to tell you, hey, that ain't right. Right? Again, there are some things that's circumstantial, but I think for the most part, accountability is key in a relationship. Because if I can celebrate you when you up and we good, and we know we love each other when we up, then that same thing should be true when things ain't going well.
So my reflection is, like, accountability is more palatable in community. I feel like if you get to know that person, and community can be friendship or it can be an associate, but like, you feel like you know somebody, maybe you can approach them and say something. Holding someone you don't know accountable is like very difficult, like, because I don't know if this is a consistent behavior or is it's like a one-time thing. But my reflection really is then going back to, like, how do we even hold friendships, especially as men in our careers? You're 21, you're in college, or you're going to graduate, life changes. And so what do we do with ourselves and our progress and our growth? We keep evolving, and some men are not coming with us, what ends up happening with those men? And I think that conversation stems to like, oh, well, are y'all holding men accountable? It's like, he wasn't in the community. I didn't know what to say to him. And so how do we collectively hold men accountable, but acknowledging the fact that like usually the people who I'm gonna either talk to or check are my friends.
I love that point, and I think like that was a perfect transition, because like as we end, and we could talk for hours, right? But the one thing that I want to end with of just everybody's kind of like opinion is based on that. What do you guys personally feel that Black men just can do better in general, right? Like if we were to hold Black men accountable, granted, we can't speak to everybody, but just based on your own experiences, whether it's people in your circle or things that you've seen, what are ways that Black men can do better? And I would love to hear just everybody's opinion on this one.
That's a pretty difficult. That's a difficult question.
That's a good one to close on. Good question to close on.
I'm gonna go early so I don't have to go last. That's my strategy. And you know, the initial thought I had, honestly, when you said it, is to give more love, share more compliments, share more appreciation for the brothers around me, and you know, take more time out for men. And so like that's, you know, a personal thing, but I think so often we're in competition with one another. That we need to be in more collaboration and agreement and building each other up. So the more love that I can offer and give, the more, you know, opportunity or just time and attention that can be offered. So that was just, it's a broad statement, and you know, but it resonates at least with me in this moment, just being able to give more love.
I follow up and say, I think men at this point in our not growth, we're doing good at self-awareness, right? We're able to see ourselves in a lot of cases in ways that we haven't in the past. But I think people think self-awareness is the work, and it's not. It's barely just even getting your feet wet. Like self-awareness does not always breed change, and I think that's what it is. Like we understand our patterns, we understand how we show up in some ways, and then we think that's it. But it's like, nah, man, there's a whole deeper process of healing. When I say healing, I mean just being able to process through, you know, some of your emotional traumas, from your past relationship and what that means for you, that we shy away from. And those like patterns come up in your everyday life. They come up in your everyday relationships. So I think moving past just thinking that healing and you knowing yourself is good enough, and really stepping into that growth. Lauryn Hill said anything that's not growing is dead, right? So really step into growth and do the work to become your full self.
I think the one thing I would say is definitely, I think as men, and like we're raised in like this patriarchy, and there's a lot of toxicity that we have to address in ourselves, what you guys are both speaking on. But I think being able to recognize that even though we're Black men, that we can create space and also support Black women a lot better, and members of the LGBTQ community, because I think a lot of times they're on the forefront protecting us, but then when it comes to protecting them, we're nowhere to be found, right? So I think being able to really speak to the experiences, listen to their experiences, but even open the door and create space when we have opportunities to allow them to also be their own voice and to speak on it, and rather than us project what we think, like really take the time to build this community together. Because I think a lot of times we are the reasons why a lot of that progress for them is stopped, because we're so busy in our ego and worried about us and focused on us that we're not even taking time to think about anybody else. So
I'm like reflecting because it's such a broad question. I feel like the direction you went in is kind of from a societal standpoint. I think the way you all talked about is from an individualistic aspect. And like in my head, I'm like, okay, what I think we need to do is both learn, unlearn, listen, and act. It's kind of like four things that I think connect to all those pieces, because at the end of the day, I think that we have to realize like we all have a lot of areas to grow in, right? And I can't hold you accountable unless I'm able to recognize the areas that I need to do that for myself first. But then also unlearn those unhealthy habits, beliefs, thoughts, and practice that hinder my own progress and or maybe hindering the progress of people that I love. And then listening, right, to y'all's point of saying, like, you don't know everything, especially if you're wanting to be more accountable for not just other black men, but black women and anybody else who you deem to be a part of your community. You have to be willing to listen, because I might think that I understand the black woman experience, but because I'm not a black woman, I have to listen first, right? And I have to make sure I actually understand, and not putting them in a monolith either, right? Because one black woman's experience is not the same as the other. And so being willing to listen in any setting that I'm not the owner or the beholder of the knowledge, so that I can best act in the ways that helps them.
I think we got, man, it's such a, it's so many factors that play into how we have been conditioned to think. It's not just the one thing. I think one of the things that's sitting with me right now is this idea of entitlement, and we have to move beyond. We have to move beyond an entitlement or an expectation as to how things should be. We have to be more honest with ourselves and open up. Communication in any situation is key, and we need to do a better job with communicating in really speaking to the emotion that we are experiencing rather than reacting, if that makes sense. And so I think it's going to take a lot of these things, but more importantly, having conversations like this, where we have spaces where we can come together and really talk about these things, because this is the process of learning, being in relationship, and knowing that you can be surrounded by individuals that's going to tell you the truth, and allowing yourself to be vulnerable to that truth, whether you're right, whether you're wrong, whatever the case may be. And so I think there's a lot of different things that we need to do. I am always of the mindset that we need to continue to move forward in love. And I think that there's a lot of healing properties in that just alone. So
I did want to follow up. I'm sure we can have multiple ways to express what black men can do. And another thing I was reflecting on is really just addressing the intersectionality that we as black men exist in America, where power plays out in many ways. And in this circle, I feel a lot of power. I feel powerful in this circle. And we both feel powerful, and our power is executed upon us in what is a predominant white society, this patriarchal society. But we also benefit in that patriarchy, and we impose that on the women as well. And I think that's one thing that we can offer the community, is identifying where our power exists and how we can support this identity, people who are black men, to identify, like, okay, yeah, I understand that you may feel this way about this group of people, but how are you imposing a will or dominance maybe on a certain people you feel subservient to you? And in that way, how can you really just crumble the notions of this person that, and just identify everyone, growing humanity for people, essentially.
Well, I kind of, heard everything that y'all was saying, so I kind of put myself in a position to go last, man. So it's a little harder, I'm not going to lie. But I think everything y'all said, you guys said it best. I think, at least for me, I was raised by black women. Black women make the world go round. And they say behind every great man is an even greater woman, and I definitely do believe that. I think as black men, one of the biggest things we also have to do is look back at that next generation coming up behind us. Because I think a lot of time, there's people around us, whether the age difference is big or small, whatever, it's it doesn't stop with us. It does not stop with us. This doesn't, this goes on. So I think taking that time to look at the next generations and pass these teachings on, that you got to love, you got to listen, you got to be that liaison, you got to, go out your way to make sure that you're, loving black women, but also loving yourself, just everything that we kind of talked about today. I think, yeah, just, you know, just passing that on to the next generation, I think. Because you guys, y'all said it, y'all covered it all. You know what I'm saying? Just passing that on and just growing from there and having conversations like this. As black men, opening up spaces to talk about things like this, whether they uncomfortable, comfortable, you know, other emotions are involved. Like, you have to be willing to have these conversations in order to grow from that. But yeah, that's the biggest thing.
Yeah. I just want to say thank you guys all for being open, being vulnerable, being here. For every single person in this room, like, I look up to y'all. I learn from y'all. I'm inspired by y'all. And I think, like, conversations like these, I knew this was going to be really powerful and really impactful. And even, like, just listen to the commentary myself, there's a lot of things that, like, hit me and make me, like, rethink and even reflect on myself. And I just want to say, like, just you guys being open and coming here and just being a part of, like, this platform and just speaking to your experiences. Thank you. I love y'all to death. Y'all are really, really, like, truly, in my eyes, like, inspirational black men. So thank you. And then, you know, to all the people listening, we appreciate you. We definitely gonna have to try to run this back again. I know scheduling, some people be worldwide, international, other people have families, kids, y'all be busy. But I definitely would love to, like, do this again, because I think these conversations are important, are necessary. And to anybody listening and watching, thank you all for tuning in. Be sure to like, share, comment, let us know your thoughts, follow everybody. And yeah, man, peace and love. Appreciate y'all. Shout out to y'all, man.
Love black men.
Yeah, black women.
Love black.